Hello and welcome to the Texas Tribune TribCast. I am Matthew Watkins, editor-in-chief of the TribCast, joined as usual by the Texas Tribune.
I mean, you're editor-in-chief of everything.
That's true.
Everything the eye can see in this building. Yeah.
And that other voice you hear, of course, Eleanor Klibanoff. And now I'm forgetting your title too.
It's been a long couple days. Law and politics reporter at the Texas Tribune. We should maybe give context.
Yes. So we are joining you. We are recording this on the Tuesday of July 8th, but you will probably be hearing this in the future as we are recording another podcast today on the flooding that happened in the Hill Country.
The Tribune is sort of on breaking news alert. So I'm glad we're going to pivot into a flood episode.
But for this week, we are beginning what is going to be, I guess, a series of two podcasts looking forward to the 2026 election. I had to check myself there and make sure that
that's correct.
It is indeed almost 2026.
Because it is currently 2025?
It is currently 2025, believe
That's crazy.
It or not.
Do you know, and I'm sorry, we will get into this, but do you know that because we are past July 2nd, 2025, we are closer to 2050 than we are to 2000?
That is indeed shocking.
Horrifying.
Yes. Time flies.
I
have nothing to say.
Time flies when you're having
to say
fun.
about that.
Yeah.
Yes. But today we are going to focus on the Democratic Party, and we are joined by a special guest, Kendall Scudder, the new chair of the Texas Democratic Party. Hello, Kendall. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, y'all. I've always been a listener, so now it's a weird experience getting to be on.
Great to have a listener.
A listener and a fan. A longtime listener, first-time caller.
Yeah.
That's right.
We ask that you still listen to the podcast even though you're on it. So
yes,
we can keep those listen counts.
You don't transcend to a new plane where you don't have to listen anymore.
I don't know. Are y'all the same way where like you can't listen to your own voice? If you try to listen to it, it sounds weird. So this might be an episode I have to skip.
That's fair.
All right. Well, maybe just play it, play it on your phone and then just leave your phone in the other room,
share it with your networks and have them listen to it.
There you go.
I will say you have a very good radio voice.
Yeah.
So, but I do understand everyone.
I don't listen. It's so anxiety inducing.
Yes. All right. Well, Chairman, we are going to talk, like we said, about the 2026 elections. But before we do that, I actually want to look back a little bit. You are fairly new to your position. You were elected in March, I believe, after your predecessor resigned midterm, in the aftermath of, what was a pretty painful and I think we can say unsuccessful 2024 election. Statewide, the party, the top of the ticket for president, losing by 14%. The Senate candidate, Colin Allred, losing by 9%. During a time where at times during that cycle, folks were thinking that Texas might be competitive. That election obviously brought about a considerable amount of soul searching in the Democratic Party in Texas and beyond. Your election came amid that soul searching. Can you just sort of remind folks who might not have paid attention to that race, what was your kind of message? What was the vision you were selling to the party looking forward after an admittedly pretty tough 2024?
Yeah, I mean, what I think was probably the most interesting about that election is that I come from the grassroots. I'm not really of the political apparatus in Austin. I'm a farm kid from East Texas who ended up moving to Dallas and being elected as one of the directors of the Dallas Central Appraisal District. And so I'm kind of this outsider of that space. And for me, I feel like the organizing grassroots piece of our party has been neglected all across the state. It's been this idea that you could just stick a sack of flour in the oven and expect it to make biscuits every election cycle. You just raise a whole bunch of money and try to buy your way out of a loss. But you can't do that. I mean, we have a lot of steps that we have to go through if we want to have success in this state. And that means organizing in every corner of this state, not just in the major metros. There's 40 mid-sized cities with over 100,000 people in them. They deserve a little bit of love too. And then, these rural communities all across the state, a lot of which we don't even have Democratic county chairs in. I mean, over 20% of counties in Texas don't have Democratic county chairs. We just have not been building the apparatus in Texas, in my opinion, in a way that can be successful. I also am a firm believer that as that farm kid from East Texas, that the party's kind of gotten away from its key message. It's that we're the party of the little guy. My granddaddy was born on a farm in East Texas that only had electricity because of Franklin Roosevelt, Sam Rayburn, the New Deal, and the Democratic Party. And when our family lost everything after the big droughts in 1959, we depended on programs in Lyndon Johnson's Great Society in order to survive. That used to be who our party was, a party of big, bold ideas that helped working people and poor people. And we would disrupt systems and take on billionaires and banks and whoever we had to make sure that the little guy had a seat at the table. And I'm trying to bring that back for the party. That needs to be the focus of everything that we do. I'm not saying that the party hasn't made an effort at that, but it's not been the center of all of our messaging and all of our discussions. So for me, everything that we talk about, everything that we do, everything that we're building for the next cycle is centered around how do we help the little guy? How do we help a working family be able to get ahead in a society that just feels like it's stacked and stacked against them every day?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if you agree with this assessment, but there was like a weird sort of sense of complacency among some Democrats in Texas, even though the party has, essentially lost every election this century. I think, people maybe looked at the demographics of this state, the changing demographics, and said, oh, well, there is this sort of inevitable shift, if not to the left, at least to the middle. 2016, the presidential ticket, Democrats lose by 16 points. 2012, they lose by 16 points. 2016, they lose by 9 points. 2020, they lose by 6 points. The state's becoming more urban. The state is becoming more diverse. That means the state is becoming democratic. And then we get to 2024 and all of those trends get reversed. Hispanic voters go way to the right, way to Trump. Even in the big cities, you see a bit of a shift to the right, and maybe there's this idea of, okay, we can't just let demographics be destiny. We need to do something about the message here. Do you agree with that assessment? Is that where the party is right now?
I partially agree with that assessment. I think that it is kind of, in order to have this discussion, you also have to have it about the fact that a fifth of our voters stayed home. Democrats. We had 1 million people in Texas that voted for Joe Biden and chose to stay home in 2024. So, did they get redder in those areas, or did our people decide we weren't worth voting for? And I'm just going to be honest. I mean, if you want to fix a situation, it's not about self-preservation. Sometimes you got to look in a mirror and acknowledge that you made some mistakes. And so I think that the party needs to do some of that. We need to figure out what we did wrong and figure out what we can do to make it right. I personally believe that it's because when you're in a coalition party like ours that has so many diverse interests and groups inside of it, you have to focus on the things that connect every single person in that coalition. And to me, it's that every one of them pay bills. And every single one of them are trying to get along in this life that is just more and more expensive. Since Republicans have taken over this state, I'd remind you that it was before I entered kindergarten since a Democrat has held statewide office in Texas. And because I am a 35-year-old, one of the only millennials in the country leading a major party. In the last 30 years, do you feel like your taxes have gone down? Do you feel like your community's more safe? Do you feel like your schools are better? Do you feel like your hospitals are better? Do you feel like your bridges and roads have gotten better? Because the only difference between 30 years ago and now is that Democrats ran the state 30 years ago. And for the last 30 years, Republicans have been chipping away at all of these wonderful projects and programs that we've had in Texas that help working people and that were designed to make us this beacon for business and for opportunity. People in the country wanting to come to Texas. Republicans have eaten away at that over the years. And now we don't know that when we flip a light switch, the electricity is going to come on. We don't know that whenever a natural disaster hits, we're going to get the emergency services warnings that we need to stay safe. We don't have the top schools in the country anymore. We're funded 43rd, 44th in the nation now. And this big, beautiful bill that just passed is going to shut down 300 hospitals in this country in rural communities, a lot of those in Texas, where people aren't even going to get access to life-saving medical care when they need it, or even preventative health care when they need it. Life has not gotten better under Republican leadership. And it's our responsibility to make clear to people, what that looks like and to point it out. And I think we've just kind of allowed it to happen and thrown our hands in the air and said, well, it is what it is. We just need demographics to change to take the state back. I think we got to be more aggressive, and we've got to get to a point where we're reminding people every day what it looks like under a Republican administration versus a Democratic administration.
Yeah, because I feel like this is like, I talk about this experience a lot, but this last election cycle, wrote a story that was like, are Texas Supreme Court seats vulnerable because of their people are so unhappy about their rulings on abortion? And then I was looking back in our archives, and we've written a version of that story these seats vulnerable because of their COVID rulings? Are these seats vulnerable because of their rulings on XYZ thing? I mean, there's so many things that I actually think national Democrats, but also Texas Democrats and individual people are like good at saying, oh, I'm unhappy with what lawmakers have done on this. I'm unhappy with what the governor is doing on this. It's outrageous what's happening here. But that's not translating into votes. I mean, you talk about people staying home. What is the disconnect there that people are saying, I'm not happy with what the Republicans are doing, but I'm still not going to vote, period, or not going to vote blue?
Well, look, I mean, the most conservative speaker in Texas history was elected with 55% of his votes coming from Democrats. I mean, if I can't tell the difference between a Democrat and a Republican, I don't know how a voter is supposed to be able to. If you take that million voters and you ask them why they chose to stay home, they'll say things to you like the Democrats don't fight hard enough, that whenever we elect them, they sit in the middle and negotiate away the things that are important to us. We've got to get back to a point where we don't put things like cordiality above the fight for working people. That when we walk in a door, we're going to flip whatever tables we have to protect working people from the onslaught of attacks that are coming from billionaires and banks. And it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And I don't think that they have seen that coming from Democrats. I mean, the most big, bold policy we've seen from Democrats, aside from, we saw some giant infrastructure investments in the Biden administration that haven't had enough time to come to fruition. But if you're talking about programs that have had time to come into fruition, the ACA, I guess, is the biggest Democratic accomplishment. And even that was us coming to the table with a center idea that Republicans chipped away on. And then we took away things like the public option that would have given people access to competitive healthcare costs. It's a shame to me when the Democrats don't walk in the door with big, bold, progressive ideas. If you don't have that healthy side of the spectrum in politics, the people who are counting on us are going to struggle. And that's what I think has happened. So I'd like to see the party get back to situations where we're unapologetic advocates for the working poor and for the working class. And that's what I'd like to see the party do. I'm going to work with our legislators. I think a lot of them that I've talked to have been on board that idea. We just have to focus and stop thinking that this onslaught and this flooding of the end zone of the Trump administration, nitpicking that is the way forward. We have to have a 50,000-foot view and some vision and a guide on how to get there.
I want to somewhat question a little bit of your framing here, particularly around the idea of we have heard people say for a long time, right? Texas isn't a red state or a blue state; it's a non-voting state, right? And there's this idea of if we could just get more. This is the Democrats speaking. If we could just get more people to the polls, the people, the poorer folks, the people of color, all those types of folks, we can shift the election in this state. One of the few kind of public polling entities that tests not, expected voters. What's the term I'm looking for here? We'll go with
sure. People expect to
likely
vote.
voters.
Likely voters.
Sorry. But actually just eligible voters, not even just registered voters, is the Texas Lyceum poll that comes out every, I think, couple years or something, or maybe it's every year. And the poll this year really got into my head because I think it disrupted some of those expectations. Greg Abbott's approval rating in this group was 55%. Donald Trump's was 54%. The state had moved dramatically to the right on issues of immigration compared to 4 years ago, and things like that. It On the other hand, you talk about working class issues and things like that. I mean, we look at what happened in the New York mayoral primary with Mamdani, who was really pushing some of these economic populist ideas and everything like that. And if you look at the precincts where he won in the wealthy areas and not the poorer areas. I mean, how sure are you that those voters, those working class voters, are actually going to respond to that progressive message you're pointing to? Because I think you look at some of the polls and history suggests that that's not always the case.
Well, this is the biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans, in my opinion. We don't forge our ideas based on who's going to politically respond to them. We forge them over what the right thing to do is. And what the right thing to do is to make sure that somebody that gets out of bed every morning and works their ass off in order to put soccer cleats on their kid, that they get an opportunity in this economy that's rigged so that the people at the top are constantly raking in record profits while all the rest of us are left at the bottom groveling for crumbs. And whether or not that translates, I mean, we'll have to see. But we as a party have always made decisions based on what the right thing to do is, and that hasn't always worked out for us in pan. But that's just kind of a crux of how we're different than them. That's what we do. I'll also point out that these polls are a snapshot of a moment in time, and that's fine. I don't know what was happening in the news at the time that Lyceum poll dropped.
Well, you know what? I will tell you, it was before Big Beautiful Bill. It was
sure, yeah.
That poll I remember talking about at the time. It was out in the field. About 3/4 of the time it was out in the field was before Liberation Day, before the tariffs came in. So you are correct in pointing out that a lot has happened since then, for sure.
Yeah, and that was exactly where I was going with that. Was number one, in just 3 months, Donald Trump pushed the largest tax increase on working class families in my lifetime with these tariffs. Number two, this big beautiful bill passed where the richest people in this country will now pay a lower baseline tax rate than the poorest, which is just straight up immoral. That a billionaire would pay less in taxes than their waiter, than their secretaries, than their golf caddies, than their top secret cabana boys, right? It's not acceptable. And when all of that is flushing through us, when people are getting their health care gutted through Medicaid, when rural hospitals are going to shut down because of that lack of funding, when we are seeing energy rates increasing because they failed to fund those programs for alternative energy that have always been funded, as these things start to hit, you're going to see a different snapshot in time. Our job is to make sure that people know what we stand for, and I'm not here to chase polls. We're going to do what's right. That's what we've always done, and that's who we're going to be.
But right. And I think that, framework, sort of that North Star, it sounds like you guys have of we're going to do what's right and sort of, try to sell that to voters. And if they come with us on that, great. But you do need to win elections to implement, what you all see as what is right. Right. I mean, when people see, so many years of Republican dominance, how do you sort of get them to stay aboard with the Texas Democrats and maybe even join, what has been for, to your point, 30 years, a losing party?
I would argue that we have a seismic shift right now in the way that we're operating as a party, in addition to kind of the seismic shifts that are happening in the realignment of the electorate. But as a party, I mean, when you put a 35-year-old for the Progressive Caucus in charge of the way that you're operating, I think you're sending a pretty strong message that things are going to be done differently than the way that we've been doing them. Our organizing is going to be different. Our messaging is different. The way that we conduct our coordinated is going to be different. The way that we go and solicit funds is going to be different. I mean, everywhere I go, we're building a grassroots movement across this state, where we're going to be trying to lean on our grassroots donors so that we aren't reliant on the super wealthy and corporate donors to be able to function as an organization. When we do that, we're able to be faithful to the people who fund our organization, and that's the working class and working people across the state. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't make a U-turn on the Titanic, but we're working right now to rebuild what it means to be a Texas Democrat. And if the national party isn't going to be here with us and they're not here to help, that's fine. That's their thing. I think it means something a little bit different to be a Texas Democrat than being a national Democrat. And we're going to lean into the policies of Sam Rayburn and Lyndon Johnson and Lloyd Bentsen. And, we're going to make sure that people understand that Texas Democrats get big things done.
So I am noticing your invocation of the working class. You're clearly a very big point of emphasis for you. I don't think you're the only Democrat in this situation. There are many people who believe that the failures of 2024, both nationally and in the state, were in part because a rejection by the working class of, whether it's real or perceived, an idea of the Democrats going a little too far on the wokeness perspective, right? The
social issues,
race, all the gender issues.
I think particularly, right, like this real tension around gender issues and trans. How much are we talking about issues of gender?
Exactly. Yeah. Am I to take by the messaging that we're hearing from you today a sign of agreement on that? Do you feel like the Democrats should, maybe if not even change their positions, at least de-emphasize some of those social issues and focus more on the economics?
When you're a part of a coalition party, you have a lot of different people with a lot of different walks of life and different perspectives. And the way I view it is that if you're willing to respect everybody sitting at the table, you're welcome at it. And where I'm from, you just be nice to people, mind your own business. And that is how I think we're going to continue to operate as a party, as we always have been. I'm not throwing anybody overboard. The coach, after losing a game, doesn't go into the press junket and blame the running backs. Okay, that's not how this works. But I do think we can get to a point where people say, kind of, actually, I'll make a point, kind of like they do about Donald Trump. You hear people say this all the time. The guy's a total asshole. We don't like him. We think he goes too far on X, Y, and Z. But I did feel like in his first term, he was throwing down and fighting for us. I disagree with that. I think that is a bad assessment. But I hear it a lot. You've heard it a lot, I'm sure. I can see by your nodding. We've got to get to a point as a party where people will say that about us. I don't have to agree with them on everything that they do all the time. And I may not understand this issue and I may not appreciate where they're at on this issue, but I did feel like when they were elected, they were throwing down and fighting for us. And it's worth it. Nobody agrees with every political party 100% of the time, except for the chairmen who are elected and required to. So I would say that we have to get to a point where we're treating everybody with respect. Basic human dignity is a baseline. Being nice to people, minding our own business, and leading with the issues that impact every member of our coalition. And fun fact about trans people, they pay bills too. Every single person in our coalition is struggling to get by because we don't have massive oil barons and billionaires in West Texas within our coalition. Our people are struggling to pay their bills, to pay their electric rates, to pay their insurance rates, to pay their property taxes, all of them sky high. I'll remind everyone that in the Democratic budget 2 sessions ago, we tried to double your homestead exemptions, and every single Republican voted against it. We tried to give a 10% rental rebate to renters. Every single Republican voted against it. We tried to expand Medicaid. Every Republican voted against it. We are the ones advocating to make sure that working people get an opportunity. It's our obligation to make sure they see it. If they haven't in the past, that's our bad. We need to fix it.
All right. Shall we talk a little bit about 2026? All right, let's
2026.
Let's do it. I would say one thing that the Democrats do have going from them is a pretty solid and prominent bench of candidates who have, high name recognition, support. The Dallas Morning News wrote this story not too long ago about 4 of those people: Beto O'Rourke, James Talarico, Colin Allred, Joaquin Castro, all kind of coming together to discuss whether how they might run and their interests in running and where they might all piece together. I think there is a general idea of maybe the Senate is the best place to run statewide if you're a Democrat right now, particularly if Ken Paxton is able to primary John Cornyn, particularly given the just massive amounts of money and pretty strong popularity in the polls of the governor, Greg Abbott. But I think there's also a sense, even among those candidates, that maybe the best thing for the Democratic Party isn't to have 4 people running for Senate
Yeah,
and
right.
no one in any of those other seats. I'm curious, just first of all, are you involved in those conversations? Are you trying to help these candidates and other candidates sort of make the right decision for the party in terms of what sets up the best slate for them?
Well, first, let me say this is a little less news oriented and kind of personal, but I'll say it's weird to me to be in those conversations. Like, because, I'm still adjusting to it. I got elected 100 days ago. And, I come from a family that just had nothing. And so it's just this wild, acclaim to the Texas public school system that I'm even able to be sitting in this chair and doing it. And I'm just appreciate the opportunity to be here. So yeah, I've been having a lot of conversations with folks. What I'll say is that I love all my Democrats equally. Um, that unlike my cohort in the Republican Party, I don't involve myself in those inter-party spats. My job is to hold the team together, to be a coach, to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction, working on a team to get more Democrats elected. Um, so I think we have a really great slate of candidates. I've had conversations with all of them. Most of the time, my conversations say you do what you feel is best for Texas first and what you feel is best for yourself second. And, it's all going to come out in the wash. It'll be fine. Because I don't think primaries are bad. If primaries were bad, Republicans would have been losing this state for the last 30 years. Right? I mean, just because you have a contested primary, that doesn't mean you're going to lose an election. I think that Democrats spending money on engaging and turning Democrats out to vote could be a good thing. As long as we're treating everybody with respect in that process and we're not being tacky and we're not getting back into like the huge vitriolic fights of the Richards and Maddox fights of 1990, then I think we're going to be fine. So that's kind of what I've told them. We as a party are here to help them with their data systems and helping them with filing. We're happy to do, whatever a party does to interact with these folks. I think it's a miscalculation to assume that the Senate race is the only race that is viable. Anybody that's doing that, I think, is making a big mistake. I think the Senate race is viable for obvious reasons that people who listen to TribCast already know, so there's no reason to rehash it. But if you look at the governor's race, he just passed a coupon to put rich people's kids in fancy private schools on the backs of poor people. And it's going to shut down schools without a doubt across this state. I don't even think it's really disputed that that's going to happen. And so you have that. You have a lieutenant governor who just fought to do something that literally no one's asking for. That's decriminalize all THC products. You have Republicans up in arms about it. The guy's already pretty unpopular. And now he's going to have people in his own side that are going to be refusing to support him because he's just completely out of line with what Texans want. You have a comptroller's office that's job is to administer this voucher program. You have a land commissioner's office that's in charge of protecting our public lands at a time where pollutants are running rampant, and we have a railroad commission's office where when we have an unstable electric grid, I think that the office that regulates energy is really important. I think every office that we have has a real viable opportunity if we seize this moment, if we build in every corner of this state, and if we spend our time defining ourselves and not allowing Republicans to define us. We have let Republicans lead us around this state. We chase them around like a lost puppy. And we say, oh, don't say that about us. That's not true. That's not true. Well, if we don't have a cohesive message about who we are and what we stand for, then people can't define us by who we are. They define us by what Republicans say we are, right? And they say we don't support strong borders and we don't support public safety. Well, I'm sorry. Last I checked, Dan Patrick is who just passed a new cash crop for the cartels, and Greg Abbott is who just pushed forward gun policies that arms those cartels, keeping all of our communities less safe. We are not people who are here to concede those issues. We need to define who we are and stick with it. That's what I intend to do, is to make a very clear presentation of who we are as a party. We're a party for the working class, a party that gets out of bed every day to take on the billionaires and the banks to protect people who are dependent on them, to keep your community safe, and to make sure that we're making your schools better for your kiddos.
Okay, so do you think it is important, though? I mean, so as we record this, is earlier, and maybe things will have changed by the time people
Almost
listen to
guaranteed
this.
in
Yeah.
this.
But right now, Colin Allred is in the Senate race. We're looking to see what the other three do. Do you think it's important that um, that group in particular avoids a clustering into that race and seeks out other ones, or do you think you're okay either way?
They're going to do what they feel is best for the state and what's best for themselves, and that's fine. Like I literally, this is I think where me and kind of my generation are different. Like we're not as risk adverse as the Democratic Party of the past. Like I didn't come onto this podcast with a script of talking points I'm going to make sure I hit today. It's we're just here to have a conversation. That's where I think my generation is different. Look, they're going to duke it out if they want to duke it out. I don't think it's bad for Democrats to spend money reaching out to Democrats. In fact, there are some Democratic strongholds in this state when I'm doing precinct analysis that had 13% turnout in a presidential year. I think having Democrats spending money on turning those people out to vote is important. So, if anything, I think the primary could be great for us. It'd be healthy. We haven't had one for a long time. The last time that we had a really well funded primary here, I think was probably the Obama Hillary situation in '08, where we started to see the party move and seismically start shifting in the right direction. So, it's going to happen the way it's going to happen. As long as what I would encourage them, and what in all of my conversations with them, it's been, is you need to do what you feel is right, but make sure that you're treating everybody with respect. We're not gonna, knock down the barn just so that, we can get ahead a little bit, but, treat everybody fairly, and let's have an honest discussion about where we want to see the party go.
I mean, we've got these four names that people are talking about a lot, and it's a good amount of enthusiasm around them, but also, s- each or many of them sort of come with their own baggage, right? I mean, Beto O'Rourke has lost several statewide races. Colin Allred coming off of a bruising loss. James Talarico, a pretty fresh face, untested. You know, if let's say, I mean, if they're all fighting off, for the Senate or even the Senate and the governor, these like really high profile races, what do you make of the bench below them? I mean, we've got, like you said, comptroller, attorney general. We also have, any number of smaller positions we need to fill in, really, we're going to have races on, even state legislature and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is where my job as state party chair of the Democratic Party in Texas actually isn't the hardest job. A lot of places it is, and a lot of facets it is. But as I go around and talk to other state chairs around the country, what's different for us is that we've got so many people in this state, and we're so geographically diverse that even if we haven't been able to win some statewide races, we have some real talent in a lot of places. So, the bench below them is only below them because they haven't been resourced. I think we have a lot of stars all over the state. We have lots of great county judges. We have lots of great DAs. We have lots of great county commissioners. We have lots of great city council people. I mean, we have some good folks that are in elected office around the state. So we have a bit of an embarrassment of riches in that, yeah, they can go ahead and slog out what they're going to do. But, if we have issues we don't have a problem filling out a statewide ballot because of our talent, I guess is the point I'm making. I don't lose a second of sleep at night worried about who's going to be able to pinch hit because we just have a lot of talent. They just haven't had an opportunity to move up. Because, I mean, let's call it like it is and be a little honest. Our party's electeds tend to be quite a bit older than they are in Republicans. That's just statistically true. And it's caused a lot of younger talent to just kind of be sitting and waiting. And so there's plenty of people there ready to step up if given the opportunity.
There is, of course, not a shortage of money among Democrats in Texas, at least among like people who support Democrats in Texas. There are wealthy Democratic donors in this state. Um, I think often the question for the state party is, can they convince those wealthy folks to spend the money here as opposed to supporting races outside the state? This is a race where I think Democrats nationally are going to find it very, very important to try to win back the House, win the Senate. How are you going to those folks to spend locally as well? How can you show people that that is a good investment when there's so much at stake elsewhere across the country as well?
Well, if they're listening today, I know a great statewide party that they can invest their resources in. Here's the argument that I would make. We are not going to make gains in this state unless we are making investments in long-term infrastructure. We have been looking at the election right in front of us and not been looking down the road at how we build up long-term success. And that's how our organizing apparatus has fallen as defunct as it has. We're working to rebuild that. And that continues on with our data systems that we have that we operate with all of our campaigns. It continues on with our compliance mechanisms, our voter protection mechanisms, everything that we have in our party. It requires long-term investment. If you invest in a candidate, that's fine. They need the help, but they're going to spend it all in one election. And whether they win or they lose, that's over. And the party's still going to be here. And so what we've been trying to convey to people is that, it's a new day in the Texas Democratic Party. We have a laser focus on building for long-term success. I think most people have probably seen the redistricting maps after the United States Census, and that makes Texas a very high priority for the nation. And if we are not doing the work now, we are going to be in a bad position 6 years from now. And so we're laser focused on it. That's what we're telling Texas donors. If you want to send money out of the state, places around the country need it too. That's fine, but understand that neglecting the fight that we have right here at home is going to reap very long-term consequences. Luckily, I don't think that we're seeing people afraid to invest in Texas. I think we have a little bit of donor fatigue, but I think that our donors are smart people. Our activists are smart people. They understand that you don't just wake up and fix this overnight. It's going to take time. And hopefully in this upcoming year, we can show some progress. Progress looks to me like moving the needle statewide. It looks to me like flipping seats down ballot to show that we're having success on the ground and moving in the right direction. If we're doing that and continuing the trend line, moving in the right direction for us, I think we continue to lock those donors in long term.
It feels like in some ways there's been like two different ways for a Democrat to run statewide in recent years. It's been the sort of, go everywhere, hold the rallies in Lubbock and San Angelo.
Stand on the table, roll up your sleeves. Not, in
I
general.
was just trying to make it not
general.
that explicit, but yeah. Or the sort of like, go to the middle, play the traditional, go for the big cities, run the TV ads, but maybe not make such a big splash, and the grassroots will come with you. Do you have an opinion on how that should look in 2026? Like, which of those paths is the right way to go?
It is. Well, okay, look, number one, I've already done events in 45 different counties across the state of Texas. I think you can assume where my natural inclination is on that question. But I'll tell you, I think it's hilarious, honestly, that every election cycle we have this discussion where the party that put a man on the moon is trying to figure out if we have the ability to organize in both rural and urban areas. It's not rocket science. Okay, we are a party of big, bold ideas. We should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. I think you've got to do a little bit of both. You've got to make sure you're milking votes out of urban areas. You've got to make sure that we're not hemorrhaging in rural areas of the state. But there's a piece of that discussion, in my opinion, where I think my vision's a little different than others, that is missing. The piece of that is missing is the 40 mid-sized cities with over 100,000 people in them in this state. I'm sorry, Lubbock is not rural. Amarillo is not rural. You're talking to a guy who grew up in New Boston, Texas. San Angelo is not rural. They are mid-sized cities. And they should be treated as population centers. Beaumont, Texas is bigger than Richmond, Virginia. Laredo, Texas is bigger than Richmond. Abilene or Lubbock, Amarillo, twice that size. So as a party, it's not just about do we do better in rural or do we run up our numbers in urban? It's why aren't you walking into population centers? And why are you not organizing there to treat them like they're population centers? And it's unacceptable for us to have giant cities that in any other state are population centers that we don't have precinct chairs in or don't have a county chair in. And we're fixing that. We're going to be showing up in all of those communities and making sure that we're not hemorrhaging the way that we always have. When we do that, you're going to see repercussions across the state. And so I think it's all things, and a party of big bold ideas should be able to do all of that organizing, because it's nothing more than shaking people's hand, looking them in the eye, telling them what you stand for, and asking them for their vote. It's not that complicated.
I want to ask about one specific group that was a big storyline after the 2024 election, which is Hispanic voters. Traditionally voted Democrat, now, really, I mean, obviously pivoted in 2024. Do you see that as still up in the air? What is the party doing to try to regain those voters?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest about what's happening in that community. What's happening in that community is the same as what's happened in the white community, where you have seen billionaires that are on the conservative side of the spectrum buy up a lot of media markets and push far right news to people without presenting it as such. And so they're getting a lot of misinformation on their Spanish language media, and Democrats have not met them there. The Texas Democratic Party doesn't have a Spanish language comms department. The National Democratic Party doesn't have a Spanish language comms department. Texas is unique because we are 30% of people speaking Spanish at home. If you start to look at our border and swing communities, it's closer to 67, 70% of people speaking Spanish at home. And we're not meeting them where they're at. We have to show up not just geographically in people's communities. We have to not only talk about the issues that are important to them, but we also have to show up where they're consuming news. And it's the same thing with young people too. Young people, we saw in the last cycle, they kind of moved away from the Democratic Party. I would argue it's a turnout thing, but Democrats weren't showing up where they consume news. I mean, I'm going to say something that's going to shake all of your listeners who are liberal to the core. Ready? I've never watched Rachel Maddow. I'm 35. I don't have cable. Like people my age and in my age group, like that formerly mainstream media is not where we're consuming information. We have to meet people where they're consuming it. And so this ties in with the conversation on Hispanic voters, because Democrats have not been meeting people where they're consuming news. We haven't been present in people's communities, and we have an obligation to fix it. I think we've also failed to make a really salient point on border security and on immigration. I mean, just own it. That I don't know why it's so hard to get Democrats to say that we support strong borders. Every one of them do. I've never met a Democrat that says that they don't support strong borders and keeping communities safe. But what they're supporting is modernizing the way that we're doing it. And I don't know why Democrats are so adverse to talking about it. I think it's because it's a real complex issue and they get in their heads. Democrats sometimes can be a little too smart for their own good, and they spend too much time kind of trying to think about over analyzing things, when you just have to speak to people at their guts and let them know who we are and what we're standing for. We want to keep your community safe. We want to make sure that your kid's able to get the same opportunities that you had. And I'm only able to sit here as the chair of the Texas Democratic Party because I had a high quality public school out in East Texas. And that opportunity is being taken away from kids all across the state, including South Texas and in the Rio Grande Valley. And the Democrats are here standing on the front lines. Every single Democrat voted against vouchers.
All right. Well, Chairman, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It's been a very interesting conversation. We will be back soon. Hear from the other side of the aisle on this. But that's it for today. Thank you again, Chairman. Thank you to our producers, Rob and Chris. Thank you, Eleanor. And
Thank
we
you,
will talk to
Matthew.
you all soon.